Welcome to my YouTube channel at Sci-Fi Tales Pools. Please subscribe, like, and share to support my channel. The war had ended, but the memory of it still burned in the heart of Ethan Cole. He walked across the dry land where cities had once stood, carrying the weight of all that had been lost. His uniform was worn, his face marked with the dust of battles that seemed endless. He had fought for survival, for duty, and for the hope that peace would return. Now peace was here, yet it felt hollow, like the silence after a storm. Ethan was not looking for reward. He had buried too many friends to care about honors or titles. But fate had a way of giving what was not asked. When he entered the ruins of an old palace, he did not expect to find life inside. The halls were broken, the walls cracked, but in the heart of the palace, a figure waited. It was young, graceful, and dressed in what remained of royal clothing. Her name was Selene, a queen without a throne. Her eyes held sorrow, but also a strange strength. She had been hidden away through the war, kept safe from those who wanted her gone. Now she stood in front of him, the last of her line, carrying the weight of a kingdom that no longer had walls. Ethan stared at her in silence. He had seen beauty before, but never like this. She was not just beautiful. She carried a kind of light with her, something that made even the broken hall seem alive. He did not know what to say, but she spoke first. Her voice was soft, yet steady, like someone used to being obeyed, but now learning how to ask. "You are Ethan Cole," she said, "a soldier of the war. You have fought when others fled. You have survived when many did not. Now by the old laws written before even this palace was built, I belong to your protection." Ethan frowned. He did not understand. "I am only a soldier," he said. "I am not someone who can carry a crown." Selena's gaze did not waver. "I do not ask you to be a king. I ask you to keep me safe. The war has ended, but the enemies of my blood will not rest. You are the one chosen by the law of inheritance. You are the one who must guard me." The words fell heavy on Ethan's shoulders. He had not asked for this. He wanted rest, a simple life away from duty. Yet here she stood, a queen without guards, a woman whose fate now rested with him. For a moment, he thought about leaving. But when he looked at her again, when he saw the fear hidden behind her steady voice, he knew he could not walk away. "We'll keep you safe," he said at last. Her eyes softened, and for the first time since the war had ended, Ethan felt a strange calm. It was not peace, not yet, but it was something like purpose. Together, they stepped out of the palace ruins. The desert wind blew around them, carrying dust and whispers of the past. Ethan did not know what awaited them. He only knew that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a soldier. It inherited something greater than land or treasure. It inherited the duty to protect Selene, the queen who had lost everything but carried the hope of rebuilding. As they walked, Selene moved beside him, her steps quiet but steady. Ethan glanced at her and saw more than sorrow in her eyes. He saw courage, and beneath it, the beginning of trust. The sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in red and gold. Ethan and Selene walked into the coming night, bound by fate, carrying the promise of a story that had only just begun. Ethan and Selene traveled together across the empty land, where silence was broken only by the wind. The ruins of towns stretched around them, broken walls and fallen stones marking places where people once lived. Ethan had walked through many such places during the war, but now, with Selene at his side, he noticed the world differently. Where he once saw only ash and death, he now saw the faint signs of life trying to return. Selene walked with grace, even in the dust. Her long dress, though torn from months of hiding, still held the shimmer of her past. She carried herself as if she was not defeated but waiting to rise again. Ethan watched her from time to time, confused by the way she could look so fragile and yet so strong. He knew she had lost everything, yet she did not break. They reached a small village that had survived the war. People stared when they saw Selene, for even without a crown, her presence was clear. Mothers pulled their children closer, men bowed their heads, and whispers spread quickly. Some looked at Ethan with respect, others with envy, for he walked beside her as if fate itself had chosen him. Selene spoke to the villagers with kindness, asking about their needs, listening to their fears. Ethan stood close, watching every face, every hand that moved too quickly. He knew danger was never far, Where there was a queen, there would always be those who wanted to claim her for themselves. That night they stayed in the village, resting in a small house offered by a family. The fire burned low, casting shadows on the walls. Ethan sat near the door, his hand never far from the weapon at his side. Celine sat across from him, her face calm in the flicker of light. "You do not sleep," she said softly. "Sleep comes hard," Ethan replied. "The war has taught me to keep watch. Danger waits in the dark." She studied him, her eyes steady. "You have carried more weight than most men could bear, but you cannot carry it forever." Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. He had been a soldier so long that he did not remember how to be anything else. Yet her words made him feel seen in a way no one had done before. "You speak like someone who has not seen battle," he said at last. Selena's voice grew quiet. "I may not have fought with weapons, but I have fought to survive. I have fought against fear every day since the war began. We fight in different ways, Ethan, but we both fight." Her words sank deep into him. For a moment he let go of the guard he always kept and allowed himself to see her not just as a queen, but as a woman who had endured her own battles. The next morning, trouble found them. A group of armed men rode into the village, their eyes set on Celine. They were not soldiers of honor, but scavengers of war. Men who wanted power by taking what was left. They demanded that Celine leave with them, claiming she needed a stronger protector than a tired soldier. Ethan stepped forward, his body between Celine and the men. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with warning. "She is under my protection. If you want her, you will have to go through me." The leader of the men laughed. "One soldier against us all? You should step aside." But Ethan did not step aside. The fight that followed was swift and harsh. Ethan moved with the skill of someone who had survived countless battles. His strikes were clean, his defense unbroken. Though outnumbered, his will was stronger. When the dust cleared, the men fled, leaving their pride broken behind them. The villagers cheered, but Ethan did not smile. He turned to Celine, checking if she was safe. She looked at him not with fear, but with something new in her eyes. "Trust. You risked your life for me," she said quietly. "I gave my word," Ethan answered, "and I do not break my word." As the sun rose higher, the village began to honor Celine openly, offering food and pledging loyalty. Ethan watched as people gathered around her, hope lighting their faces for the first time in years. She spoke to them, not as a ruler above them, but as one of them, promising to rebuild what was lost. Ethan stood a little apart, silent as always, but inside he felt something shift. He was no longer just guarding her because of duty. He was guarding her because he wanted to. He saw in her the chance for a future that was more than endless war. That night, as they left the village and continued their journey, Celine walked closer beside him. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was filled with something unspoken, a bond that was beginning to grow stronger with every step. Ethan and Celine traveled farther from the village, moving into lands where the scars of war grew deeper. Burned fields stretched for miles, and the remains of broken machines lay scattered in the dust. The silence of these places was heavy, as if the ground itself remembered the battles fought there. Ethan kept his hand near his weapon, his eyes sharp for danger. Celine walked beside him, her face calm, though he knew she felt the weight of what they saw. As night fell, they made camp near the ruins of a stone bridge. Ethan built a small fire and sat close, watching the flames. Celine sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. For a long time they did not speak, but the silence between them was not empty. Finally, Celine lifted her gaze to him. "You saved me again in that village," she said. "You stood against men who outnumbered you." "Why?" Ethan looked into the fire before answering. "Because I gave my word. And because if I had failed, you would have been taken. I could not allow that." Selena's voice grew softer. "But you risked your life. Many would not have done the same." "You are more than a soldier," Ethan shook his head. "I am only a man who has seen too much war. I am no hero." But Celine did not agree. She looked at him with a steady gaze. "Heroes are not born. They are made by what they choose to do. And you have chosen to protect, even when you could have walked away." Her words lingered in his mind long after she lay down to rest. He stayed awake, keeping watch as always. But his thoughts were no longer on the shadows beyond the fire. They were on her, on the strange bond that was forming between them. The next day brought new danger. As they crossed a dry valley, a group of riders appeared on the ridge above. Their banners marked them as men who served rival lords, men who saw Selene as a prize that could give them power. The riders shouted, demanding that Ethan hand her over. Ethan pulled Selene behind him and stood firm. "She's under my protection," he called back. "If you want her, you will have to take her from me." The riders charged, dust rising around them. Ethan gripped his weapon and braced himself. The fight was fierce. Steel clashed against steel, and the sound of battle filled the valley. Ethan moved with skill and strength, every strike driven by the promise he had made. The riders were many, but his will was unbroken. Selene, though unarmed, did not run. She stood close, her eyes never leaving him, her presence a steady reminder of why he fought. At last the riders fell back, retreating into the distance. Ethan was cut and bruised, his breath heavy, but he still stood. Selene rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she touched his arm. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "But I was not," Ethan said, forcing a tired smile. "And as long as I stand, no one will take you." Selena's eyes filled with something more than gratitude. She looked at him as if seeing not just a soldier, but a man she could trust with her life. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean against him, her strength and his strength becoming one. That night, they rested in a hidden cave. Ethan tended his wounds while Selene lit a small lamp. She worked beside him, tearing strips of cloth to bind his cuts. Her hands were gentle, her touch steady. Ethan had never been cared for in this way. It stirred something in him that he could not name. "Why do you stay so close to me?" he asked quietly. Selene met his gaze. "Because you have given me safety when I had nothing. Because in your presence, I feel hope again. And because I believe that together, we can build something greater than what was lost." Her words struck deep in his heart. For years, Ethan had lived only for survival. Now, for the first time, he began to believe in something more. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Villagers they met began to whisper of the soldier and the queen who walked together, bringing hope where there had been none. But in the shadows, enemies plotted, waiting for the moment to strike again. Ethan knew danger was not gone, but as long as Selene was by his side, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey of Ethan and Selene soon turned from quiet travel to something greater. Word of them began to spread across villages and broken towns. People whispered of the queen who had survived the war and the soldier who guarded her with his life. Wherever they walked, hope followed. When they reached a town built along a river, the people gathered to see them. The town had been struck hard by war, its walls cracked and its streets filled with sorrow. Yet when Selene spoke to them, her voice steady and clear, their eyes began to shine again. She promised not riches or glory, but unity, the chance to rebuild what had been lost. Ethan watched her from the side. He was never a man of many words, but he saw how the people leaned forward when she spoke. He saw how their faces softened, how their backs straightened, as if they carried less weight. She carried no crown, no throne, yet her presence was enough to remind them of what they could be. But not everyone welcomed them. In the shadows of the town, men with hard eyes spoke quietly. They did not wish for a queen to rise again, for her return threatened their control. These men began to plot against Ethan and Selene, waiting for the chance to strike. That night, Ethan sensed the danger. He had lived too long as a soldier not to notice the way certain men moved, the way they avoided his eyes, the way whispers grew louder when he passed. He kept close to Selene, never letting her out of his sight. When the attack came, it was swift. A group of armed men burst into the house where they stayed, blades drawn. Ethan moved at once, pushing Selene behind him. The clash of steel filled the air. Though outnumbered, Ethan fought with the strength of someone who refused to fall. Selene did not scream or flee. She stood behind him, calm but unshaken, trusting him completely. At last the attackers fled, their pride broken, their strength no match for his will. Ethan stood wounded but unbroken. Selene rushed to his side, her hands gentle as she helped him sit. "You cannot keep fighting alone," she whispered. "We need more than one soldier if we are to survive." Her words were true. The next morning, Ethan and Selene called the townsfolk together. Selene spoke of rebuilding, of standing as one people instead of living in fear. Ethan added few words, but his presence was enough. The people believed not just because of her voice, but because they saw the bond between them, a bond of trust and sacrifice. Slowly, men and women began to step forward, offering to join them. Farmers, craftsmen, and former soldiers pledged loyalty. Together they formed a small guard, not of trained warriors alone, but of people ready to fight for more than survival. With every passing day, the town grew stronger. Walls were repaired, markets reopened, and laughter returned to streets that had been silent for years. Ethan trained the new guard with patience, teaching them discipline and courage. Celine worked with the people, listening to their needs, walking among them not as a distant queen, but as one of their own. One evening, when the sun set over the river and the air was calm, Ethan stood beside Celine on the town walls, looked out at the horizon, his heart heavy but steady. "You have given them hope," he said quietly. Celine turned to him. "We've given them hope. You may think you are only a soldier, Ethan, but to them, you are proof that strength and loyalty still live in this world." Ethan met her gaze and saw truth in her eyes. He had always thought of himself as a man of war, nothing more. But now, beside her, he began to see a new path. He was not just guarding her. Together, they were shaping something that could last beyond both of them. Still, shadows lingered beyond the horizon. Ethan knew that enemies would not stay silent forever. There were still men who wanted power, still forces waiting to strike. But as Celine's hand brushed lightly against his, he felt ready. Whatever came, he would stand with her. The night grew dark, the stars bright above them. Ethan and Celine stood together in silence, not needing words. They had begun to build more than a town. They were building a future. The days of peace in the town did not last long. Messengers came with word that a great force was marching toward them. Rival lords had joined together, fearing that Celine would rise again and bring unity to the broken lands. They brought soldiers, weapons, and banners, promising to destroy all who followed her. Ethan stood before the gathered people in the square. Men and women listened with serious faces. Children clung to their mothers, and fear hung heavy in the air. Ethan spoke with calm strength. "The enemy comes because they fear what you have built. They fear your courage, they fear your queen, and they fear your will to live free. If we stand together, we will not fall. I have fought many battles, but this one is different. This one is for your homes, your families, and your future." His words reached the hearts of the people. Farmers took up spears, craftsmen held axes, and young men carried bows. They were not soldiers, but they were ready to fight for what mattered. Celine walked among them, her presence giving hope stronger than any weapon. She spoke not of fear, but of the dawn that would come if they stood strong. When the enemy arrived, their numbers filled the